Hey, we're live. This Life in Tech, episode 174. I'm Jason.
I'm Dan.
And I'm mildly sickened right now, and I'm TK.
You know, as Dan was doing this, I was thinking, TK, if you ever want to inspire young minds, put on a toga because you look just like Socrates.
So great. So
Oh, Jesus, man.
Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, morons.
Well, I'll tell you, man. Two of my favorite benches. So at HPU, we have this long promenade, right? It's very visually oriented, and all along it, like every 10 feet, there's a bench, and each bench has a full life-size bronze statue of a famous person, right? And my two favorite ones are Aristotle and Leonardo da Vinci.
You know what Dan was thinking while you were saying that there was this promenade of statues of famous people. He's like, I wonder where mine's at there.
Hey, there's a couple of empty benches. I've found out to put dibs.
It's not yet my time.
See?
Soon. I am patient.
So, speaking of being patient,
wheels off the cart.
Yeah, right. Let's get this fucker right back on track. Check this out. So we've all used Twitter a fair bit, and so
occasion.
Yeah, for like Dan, I don't know if you're into this right now with some of the stuff you're working on, like with the layer. Which, by the way, not only am I subscribed as an individual, but this show is subscribed to you.
Nice. Yeah. Now all we have to do is get, in terms of the promotions, cross promotion, because it puts us both up on YouTube rankings.
Yeah, exactly.
I did that with Mansour's show.
59% of links per legitimate study posted in a tweet, right, are not clicked ever.
Well, everyone's gotten used to the TLDR. And so they read the headline like TLDR, and actually now they don't even put that on there. They just retweet it.
Yeah. Well, you know what I've noticed, like from video game streaming, there's a real, so you have a link, right, and then you have all the metadata and all the SEO around that, right? Thumbnails for the images have become a type of embedded, almost what like a QR code was supposed to be, where you could look at it with a QR code with technology, and then you would get all this rich information, right? The thumbnails for videos, particularly through YouTube, have turned into some kind of like, I don't know, pregnant data set. I don't get it. But
absolutely true. Absolutely
59% of links aren't clicked, man. That shocked me a little bit, I'll be honest with you.
Actually, I'm not shocked at all by that.
Really?
That does not. I thought you were gonna say it's somewhere in the 70s or 80s.
Now, here's your 70%. I'm looking at my little notes up here because I actually took some fucking notes.
Look at you, Captain Prepared.
Yeah, look. 70% of Facebook, now take this with a grain of salt because it's Facebook, right? But 70% of Facebook users were found to only read the headline before replying to an article. Here's how they did it. This is genius, man. I love simple science like this. This is one of the actual things I like about Facebook, and I wish they were a little more open about in terms of like social science research. Phenomenal platform to do that in. Partly because they collect so much fucking data, but that's a different story. These dudes rigged up an article that looked like a news article in terms of like its thumbnail. That's where I was going with this, and its construction of like its columns and all that stuff, right? And they filled it with the standard Latin lorem ipsum placeholder text, but they put a real headline on it. And they got like hundreds of thousands of comments. Dude, what a great little test.
So, but that right there, that's the exact reason I'm not surprised, right? People read comments and they're either confirming their bias, right? And they want to get their opinion out, right? It's not about what that article is. It's like, ooh, I saw something where I know everybody's going to at least look at this, and then they're going to look at the comments, and now I can get my opinion out. Or they're rabidly against it just from a headline perspective. And now they want to, how many times have you seen somebody comment on something and it has nothing to do with what the article's about, who that person's about? they just now, like, they're sitting in their basement or in their house, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm mad about something, and I want to find a way an outlet to comment on it. And so they'll comment into something, and it's like, okay, you're not even we're not in the same room of the discussion what you're talking about. So I don't have a problem believing that. In fact, like I said, I thought it would be more than the 50-60% that are there, because most people's attention span is that of a 6-year-old on Adderall. But that's not even, it doesn't scare me at all.
Yeah, it just, I don't know how to situate it. Like, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know that all links are equivalent. That's something to keep in mind too. Like some links may be more attractive. The study, at least at the level that I was able to read it, because the real studies behind a paywall, didn't really contextualize how the links were presented. So keep that in mind, right? And like you said, we know that a lot of social media is driven through outrage. That's why the algorithms tend to seem so biased to individuals, right? So like, if I'm more liberal leaning, I actually click more on more conservative links because it's the mentality. I've heard it described as, I want to see what these guys are up to. I want to see what these guys are up to. I don't like you. I don't like.
It's the Howard Stern phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that whole aspect where he said, he has something like 90% of his listeners that hate him. They listen for 30 minutes. Why is that? Because they want to see what he's going to say next.
Right.
And 90% of the people that like him stay on for 30 minutes. Why is that? Because they want to see what he's going to say next. I mean, it's the same things. And none of this surprises me really at all, because it's all about, this person forwarded this link, so they must have read it and they like it. So I'm going to retweet it because I don't want to seem like I'm the idiot in the room.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, because then there's going to be other people that do wind up reading it, and it gets Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, all the social media platforms. It winds up getting that distribution of that particular media out to a much larger audience, and therefore the net that they've casted for that 20% that may wind up actually reading it got out there much more quickly than if they just tried doing it on their own.
Well, and I think I've started to think that a good bit of this general skewing of public perception of things happens through this chain of events, and it just happens so fast it's not really perceptible, whereby something will get posted, let's say to Twitter in this case, right? And the public reaction to it, because it's like tin cans with string, right? That message is slightly shifting because nobody's responding to the original source. It's copies of copies of copies, right? So it's slowly shifting it one direction or the other. And because the news media, I think a large part, at least technologically, is still lagging behind culture, right? That they're picking it up downstream somewhere, and that's what they capture. But it's already skewed past, I'm not going to call it the truth, but for lack of a better term, the truth, at least as it was in its original form. And so it just skews.
Well, I think rather than saying the truth, I think the original sentiment.
There you go. Sure. I agree with that.
Is what changes, right? It's the old thing where you put, I tell somebody, and then it goes around the circle, and 10 people later, what comes back to me?
Yeah, right.
And so in large measure, when we want to have accuracy along a large group of people, it's if you're the leader, if you're the orator, however thing, there's what I say and there's what people hear. And if you want to skew public opinion and have a very wide audience that will do it, you basically put something that when I say it, people can hear it different ways, and then you create the maximum amount of outrage, right? Either positive affinity or negative affinity, but we'll say that where everybody wants to stand up with pitchforks and placards and say, I'm for this, and if you're not, you're an idiot, or I'm against this, and if you're not against it, you're an idiot, right? And that's what drives the media today, right? The truth doesn't drive anything that goes on anymore, right? Because if you can side by side, I was out at a restaurant, and side by side, there's Fox on one TV and CNN on the other. The exact same interviews being done, largely it almost looks like the exact same camera, but yet the lines underneath are, President president going to kill everybody on the planet, president going to save everybody on the planet. There's no middle ground, right?
No.
Because of the 24-hour news cycle and because of social media, we start to lack nuance and contact.
That's right.
And in a nation as big and diverse as the U.S., that's inextricably linked to the global being, and largely says we want to be and put in police officers, leaders, whatever, of the world. How do you do that with 8 billion people on the planet? And how do you do that and have any kind of long form discussion? Right? Look constitutionally. The house is designed to be a gutter fight, right? And that's why if you don't like your roads and school systems, or not school systems are bad. If you don't like your public works, go get yourself a new congressman. If you don't like your foreign policy, go get yourself a new senator. Because the Senate by design was designed to be deliberate and have long form discussion and deliberation. Well, now every time those doors open, somebody puts a microphone in your face and you're supposed to know everything. Right? I'm not talking about education level. I'm talking about knowledge. And we largely employ C students in Congress now. Why? Because nobody wants to put up with all the no person of merit is going to be like, why would I do that? That's how we end up with the presidential candidates we end up with. Right?
Well, and it's in large part, it's the exact same symptom, societal level symptom you see with public education. For the longest time, it's the bottom 30% of an undergraduate cohort that goes into K through 12 education. The bottom 30%.
Yeah.
And so then you get this copy of a copy of a copy effect. Well, and it's exactly the same thing, because who else wants to do it? It's such bullshit.
Yeah, I had something very similar to this happening the other day on Facebook. Someone posted an article about transgender female competing in female sports, and it's like, this is outrage. They should be allowed to do it. And I said, I don't agree with that. And of course they go on the flaming tribe telling me, hey, there's more than 2 sexes out there. It says, yes, I'm quite aware of all 5 of the sexes, but only 2 of them can reproduce. I said, what you're getting at, and they did, because they clearly didn't read the whole article in there, because it was trying to have a discussion. And really, it's not just about the testosterone; it's about the bone density, the body fat makeup, and the muscle composition. I'm like, look, if you do this, you're talking about someone that's going to have the bone density and muscle mass. I gave the analogy of the UFC fighter, Henry Cejudo. I think hopefully I pronounced his name right. He walks around at like 155 pounds competing at 125. Valentina, who's also the 125-pound champion for the female, she walks around at 135. On fight night, she weighs 130, and Henry weighs 145. I don't think it's fair, but they didn't read the whole article, but they felt necessary to kind of school me on how many actual sexes there are.
Well, because it's a point of moral outrage. Like, here's an example. I really thought about whether I was going to talk about this or not, but it fits this point, and it's also the theme of what we've been talking about for several weeks. So I saw this morning, or maybe it was last night, I don't remember, because it wasn't that important to me until I thought about it in this context. Taylor Swift, who, like, I'm aware of, like, if you show me a lineup of photos of pop stars, I know which one Taylor Swift is. But I don't know that I've ever heard her music. I understand it's very popular, so it's important to culture as it is right now, right? And she sent this tweet out that basically said some of the Confederate statues in Tennessee offend her or make her physically sick, so she wants them removed. And my immediate thought, call me crazy, please do, okay? But my immediate thought was, well, isn't that why you want to keep them up? Like so we can all say, don't be like that. Like, remember, don't be like that. Like, I don't do it.
Go ahead. You mean it like in the context of like the Holocaust Museum type thing?
Yeah. Hey, what a great example, right?
All right, so let's get into moral outrage here. And I've said, you guys have heard me say, I know Dan has heard me say this. Yeah. Should the Holocaust Museum be in D.C. or should it be pick a major town in Germany?
Right.
Because in large measure, like the Japanese, the Germans there's a bubble in how they teach history.
Right.
And they buttress up against the Versailles Treaty and what really bad international public policy did to a nation to strip it of its identity and make people feel open to the ideas that led to the rise of Hitler. And then we go to post World War II, right? When I was a young frogman, there was a German exchange student or German exchange guy all the time. There's an American that's in Germany, and like I went to England and did the same thing. We're in the barracks on a Saturday morning in Puerto Rico, and there's Discovery Channel on it, or History Channel, something about World War II. The German guy sits down, and he's watching it for a while. We're just waiting because it's What's Left of Civilization channel. Finally, he goes, "Why do you guys always have to have stuff on about the war?" And one of the guys turned around and goes, "Well, if you guys hadn't started it, we wouldn't have all this stuff." And he goes, "Win a couple world wars, and then you can pick what's on TV," right? And largely joking about it. But the reason that so many Japanese tourists go to Hawaii, the only thing they really want to go to is they want to go to the Arizona.
Yeah.
Because it's a big piece of their public education that's been left out of, right?
Right.
Now, do I think that, do I understand and have empathy to the fact that a significant amount of the population believe that all these memorials to Confederate officers in particular are insensitive, right? And I understand how people get there, right? Mm-hmm. But the Taliban goes in and destroys monuments, right?
Right.
Totalitarian regimes want to get rid of any vestige of things that were done incorrectly. If I'm going to say let's get rid of something, let's go and change every army base that's named after Confederate general. Right?
Is that because most of them were incompetent?
Well, yeah, most of them were not folks of merit, right? They were citizens or residents of that state.
Right.
I mean, there's 3 or 4 of them in Virginia alone, right? The whole Southeast is littered with Confederate generals who were largely not of merit. And unless you talk in South Carolina, you got Fort Jackson, you got Fort Lee here. But that more than anything, that's easy, right? How did we pick that? That guy he was from Virginia. We were roaming around and he was from Virginia, so we did that, or he was from South Carolina, right? But when you talk about the monuments, I think what a powerful statement, because Richmond obviously was the capital of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And like when I see these morons talk about the stars and bars, my first question is like, who was the president of the Confederacy? If you can't answer that, it's not about history and heritage, it's about hate. And let's right. And so when you look at, you go to Richmond, right? I mean, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting some vestige of the Old South, right? That goes deep, right? And it's still today, that runs deep, right? But what's a more powerful statement than to have a memorial for General Lee or any of the Southern generals or Jefferson Davis, and then the next monument
who was the president of the South,
right? And then the next monument over is the monument of Arthur Ashe, right? We want this whole movement now of tear everything down. That's what happens when you don't get your way in the immediacy. But if you're thinking long form, it's like you've heard me say this on the show, and I say it everywhere. I want people that are in the Klan to be on television every day talking about it, because the more you hear what they have to say, the more abhorrent their views become. Yeah. Right? And hiding all that and pushing that back down. Why do we want to tamp that down? We want to go, look, this is exactly why this is a country we don't want to be. Right?
Exactly.
And I want people to be offended. I want people to feel uncomfortable, because I want them to be outraged enough to go to their elected officials and say, we want change and we want it to be this way, because we don't want that guy or a guy like him to ever be put on top of a big block of granite again.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because it should be a conversation about how can we all reach some type of middle ground so that we don't have to build those types of statues ever again. Right. That seems like a laudable goal to me. And that's kind of why this original article about Twitter trying to come up with a way to, in essence, get people to read before they react kind of struck a chord with me. It's like, well, okay, so like even all the way back to maybe late elementary school or middle school in the US, we all did those reading comprehension exercises, right? We were given a few paragraphs of a story and then you got to answer some questions. I'm not saying exactly like that, but what if you had to do something like that before you could respond to a post?
I think it's more simple than that, because the two thoughts that I think are prevalent in this are: do we not allow somebody to retweet if they haven't read, right? Or do we put some sort of statement on there, right? Maybe it's a hashtag, or maybe it's just 4 letters, or that means something larger, an acronym or something like that. I tend to go for the acronym.
TLDR.
Okay.
Well, whatever, but but I tend to go for, this hasn't been read, right? However you want to, this has just been retweeted, however you want to articulate that, because then you're telling a story about the person who retweeted it, right? You're not saying that you're for it, you're against it. But the minute you say, I won't retweet it because somebody hasn't read it, I think censorship.
Okay.
Right.
Well, then can we find a middle ground where maybe the platform provides both options? So that way, if you just want to react because that's what you need in the moment, and I understand the need to perhaps engage in some mischief posting, Mr.
Right.
Ford.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you can just do that.
I would never do something like that.
And it would get the little tag, right? Or if I want to engage with somebody, maybe I don't even know them, but this is how I meet people, in a substantive conversation, I can go through some type of little exercise. Let's call it an intellectual CAPTCHA. And I have that pathway available to me. Bang, done, problem solved.
Like I said, I'm all for the intellectual or emotional honesty of, here's what we did. I didn't read it. But the headline caused me to think a certain thing, and and what you're telling people is I'm effectively commenting on a statement.
That's right, exactly.
Right, I'm effectively commenting on that. I'm not. Don't hold me accountable for the entire article because I'm making a comment on the headline, and I'm
fair enough,
right? Because I don't care who you are. I don't want you not talking in the public domain if that's what you want to do.
Agreed.
And I don't have to agree with you. And in most cases, I prefer that. To hear things I don't agree with, right? Because most people that who you follow on social media or who you react to in the news, right? You're doing it for affirmation, not information, right? And so whether you watch CNN all the time or you watch Fox, right? Or it's in primarily or in the U.S. it's kind of both sides. But I'm not a big believer that there's a tremendous amount of difference in Congress from a Republican and a Democrat. I think they're obverse sides of the same coin, shouting at their base.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so why can't you follow, why can't I follow MSNBC and pick Fox, OAN, the thing, and get opinion from both of those? Because nothing in life is black and white. Right. And that's really what we're trying to say is, with the media these days, is if you don't listen to us, you don't know what's going on, and it's on both ends of the coin, right? Or both ends.
You're the enemy.
What's that?
You're the enemy,
right?
If you don't listen to the same thing I do, you're the enemy.
Well, but think about it this way: if everybody goes out and they stop basically running to the pole that they think is the prettiest color, right? That's what I need to identify with something, right? I have to have affinity beyond all else to something else, to one thing. And they start looking and living and going, okay, nothing in life is black and white. Well, actually, there's one thing: don't touch kids, right? But everything else, there's nuance to it.
And binary.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little in life that's binary, right? Everything else is a big open thing. So, if somebody wants to move the nation in one direction or another, then having people think and say, well, that's not 100% correct. Let's think. That doesn't help.
You mean think like the elections were hacked?
Well, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Whatever the.
That's the narrative that's going around now. Is that Biden is already saying President Trump is going to steal this election again.
Right. Well, let's talk about the election, right? Or let's talk about voting in particular, right? You're required to have identification for everything, right? To do anything in the U.S., you're required to have identification. But then all of a sudden we say requiring ID to vote it's racist. Thing, whatever. This is my statement on this. If we believe that the voting, how we vote, how we elect officials is not immutable, right? We owe it. If we want, as a civilized nation, we owe it to the citizens of the nation to figure out how to bring the election to the people and to do it quickly, right? I'm of the mind that paper ballots are rife with compromise because of how you can harvest ballots, right? I'm also a big believer in technology in this. With phones, right? We have statistically what would be considered to be full penetration of mobile devices, right? Yeah. You know, in the country. We're at a point where you could build an app that's secure that you can vote with. And it would be much harder to compromise than the software that's in a lot of these voting machines. But even if you
TK, the cell phones can be hacked.
I got it. But apparently so can everything else, right? But here's the thing. Look at India. India, when they had their first free elections a few years ago, leading up to that, they said, you don't have to mandate everybody to vote when they've never had the right to vote, right? Especially in this day and age. They're going to rush to do that. So they went to the remotest parts of India and they said, we are going to make it easy for people to vote, right? We want to have full participation. And so we're going to make it easy. So they put kiosks and everything all over the country. You made it like it was almost impossible. You almost had to run into one to vote. Even where I live, where it's not difficult, but they've moved the place around in the last 4 or 5 years enough to where somebody could legitimately be confused. They're not denied being vote, but it's not. They haven't kept it at the same place. Right, and they've collapsed it into things, so they have to have less workers helping out and stuff like that, right? Well, that and taking the general impatience of people and everything like that, and even moving primary dates because of COVID. Right? How are you getting it out there? So, if you're going to say we want to have max participation in an election, it's upon the government to say, what are we going to do to ensure we can do this with legitimacy? And it's getting it out, making it easy to vote, right? It's like when you sell something, make it easy for people to give you money, right? I want to have full accounting of the citizenry. Let's make it easy for them to vote.
Which state's going to be the first state to allow voting through technology remotely?
California.
What do you think, TK?
It's California, Washington, or New York State.
I was thinking Washington, just because of Microsoft and Amazon being there, because they're both then going to start vying for the platform to support it.
Not bad guesses.
Yeah.
I think those are likely candidates. That's probably the top three, and you can argue for different order. Sure.
Yeah. I don't know that I would say. I wouldn't be surprised if there's any one of those three.
Agreed.
But what it's going to take is the first one.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think.
But it'll be for statewide elections first, because the FEC is going to have to weigh in on it for federal elections, and you're going to have to prove some immutability with a statewide election. Or a local election, we're voting for dog catcher or whatever. Let's do this thing. There's some really cool apps out there right now. Small companies that are, then it's all about voting. Union elections, school board. Like small little groups of populations of people where they can control it. And we all know that we have the technology to say, okay, that was that person that did that.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this, because I was only slightly joking that, hey, these apps can be hacked. Of course they can at a certain given time. But let's take the amount of transactions that Amazon does in the year, and I have no idea how many that is. What do you think the percentage of fraud is for Amazon transactions? A guess? I'm thinking it's less than 5%, which is still a lot of transactions.
I would definitely agree. It's 10 or less, 5. I'd probably go with it. Sure.
Okay. So the reason I was going with this is like, what if we can get 90% of the population here in the United States to vote? Mm-hmm. And if Amazon's doing this, and there's a huge amount of financial implications involved for Amazon as a publicly traded company if they have a lot of fraud. I mean, that's really the key. If you have too much fraud, it's going to affect their bottom line. In an election, what if we had 10% that were fraudulent? You still that means you had a 90% turnout. So 10% is bad. So you got 80%. That's still, we gained an additional 40% almost in the voting pool that have been voted in the past.
Well, 10% would be in what I think most reasonable people would consider a tolerable error margin.
Yeah. I think that
even though you're talking about millions, it's still within, I think, a tolerable allowance.
I think so. Even if it was 10%, because like right now we had less than 50% voter turnout, right? And if we can get it up to a perceived valid 80%, that's a significant jump. And then
that would change the faces of our politics. And it seems to me, I mean, come on, man. I mean, I know I get a little optimistic and utopian sometimes, a little left-leaning in those ways. But dude, if one dude in a private company can figure out how to launch people into space and then land the fucking boosters autonomously, I think we can figure out how to vote securely.
There's a difference between how to and want to.
Yeah.
Right? Do we have the will as a nation anymore to be completely transparent and work towards fidelity in the voting booth anymore? Is that something we desire as a nation, or have we walked into separate camps so much that we'll do anything to get our guy elected and we don't care about the consequences because we're so invested in the idea that my guy's right? And I say guy, I mean guy, girl, person,
sure,
whatever, right? The person that's on that ballot, there was a guy that used to be on Fox. He was the liberal guy in a conversation and group of conservatives, and they asked him why he always voted Democrat, which I think is a great answer for any party. Why do you vote? Why would you vote? Like, close your eyes and just don't worry about the names. Just look down the side, and whoever's a D or an R, vote for them. Why would you do that 100% of the time? And he said, when I was little, my dad said, I always heard my dad, he goes, when you walk into the voting booth, if you pull that R handle, bad things happen. Right? And I'm sure those conversations on either side of the political spectrum happen as you grow up, right? Well, now today you look at what's going on politically and socially in the country and the anger that's there. Well, Jared's a senior in college, and he has some definitive ideas about what should be done, right? A lot of them are fueled by emotion. Right? Yeah. Giuliani said years ago, he goes, if you're a conservative when you're 20, you have no heart. And if you're a conservative when you're 20, you have no heart. And if you're a liberal when you're 40, you have no brain. Right? What's the difference between those two? Right? It's you now have a fuller view. And I don't think people wildly shift from being extremely liberal to being extremely conservative in a lifetime. There are a few people here and there that probably have an epiphany of some sort, or they've been wronged and all of a sudden it changes their view. But most people, it's a slight shift on either side of center. Right? I think today society is starting to want to require you get to one edge or the other, and then you park it there for the rest of your life, and not being able to mature and grow and have more complete, fuller thoughts. Like this defund the police thing, right? It's like, okay, I understand what you're angry about now, but the bad tale of defund or abolish or do whatever with public safety is that when you're desperately in need of help, where do you get it from? Right? Because you do need that, right? And
but it worked in Camden, New Jersey, TK.
Please stop talking. Right, just that's where you're going to go. Just sit there quietly for a second and twirl your mustache.
Hey, listen, I lived at one point in an apartment complex called Camden, and it was named after Camden, New Jersey. And let me tell you, just because of the name and by association, it was
It's a rough place to live, right?
Well, but this is the thing. This is the clickbait aspect. People go, oh, because Camden, New Jersey, they defunded. Well, what they did is they disbanded and then reset up because they felt that everyone that was currently in the law enforcement in that city were corrupt. So
that's what I was driving at. That's exactly what I was driving at. Here's the thing right now, and this is going to be the hard part, because the people that are going to have to vote to do this, and to create the mechanism of laws or policies that do this, I want the same policies applied to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So if you're in a position of public trust, and nowhere is that defined more than the community engagement of policing, right? If you are seen to be a bad steward of that trust, and in the case of the police, it's being heavy-handed or outright breaking the law, that the penalties for that are extremely strict and consequential immediately, right? The big outrage with Minneapolis is not just the fact that that guy died in custody and was effectively, I believe, murdered, right? That Floyd was murdered. Now, this is from somebody who's been taught how to detain people, right? The rule number one of detention is once you detain them, it's your responsibility to keep them alive. Right? That's like the rule number one. That's like Fight Club, right? Rule number one of Fight Club.
Yeah.
Is don't talk about Fight Club. Rule number one of detaining somebody is they don't die in your custody, right? It took them a protracted period of time. I mean protracted, meaning that effort was not handcuffs while he was on the scene, right? That's what drove the outrage. And it should. Right? It totally should drive the outrage. And the fact that we're doing this incremental march towards the right charge, right? The three guys that were standing there, right? Hey, all it takes for evil to exist on the planet is for good people to stand around and do nothing.
Yep.
Right? Will Smith, I think, is right on. He goes, we don't have any more racism in this country. We're just videotaping it. Right? And that's the thing. And so when you start talking about heavy-handed police tactics, it's if you start from the fact that, hey, once I got the guy in custody, then think. Now, you go to the other end of the spectrum, and I think that in particular, the Black Lives Matter movement is being co-opted by, probably this extreme statement, anarchists, right? Or certainly people that don't have, that's not their sole goal. Because it's one thing. I'll give you an example. So in Virginia Beach, there was a little bit of this down at the beachfront, right? And some windows were broken, and there was, low level, not anywhere near the extremes of some of the bigger places. The next day, the Black Lives Matter people got on the news and said, that wasn't us. That was people that got involvement. And they said, we're going back into the community and we're going to help those businesses rebuild, right? You know what they've got is they've got a lot of public sentiment on their side now. Why?
Sure.
It wasn't so big that it was just hard to, this big tentacle, like in a big major city, they could stand out the next day and they say, we're going to own this because we wanted to march. And largely it was, hey, like I said, I was happy to watch people walk up and down the street all day and exercise their First Amendment right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the minute somebody tries to stop that, that's worse than whatever anybody's saying, even if I completely disagree with you. But because it comes back to, I want to hear what you have to say. Because if I can hear your honest views on what your agenda is, I can make a decision as to whether to pick up a sign and march with you or go to the voting booth and try to ensure that you never get what you want.
Right.
That's
exactly.
what we lost today. Right? And there's a certain amount of, it's what plays on the news. Right?
Sure.
People throwing bottles of cars and burning buildings down, that's big money.
Yeah, there's not a lot of clicks for links that go to compromise. Like,
right. Well,
hey,
I tend not to watch the local news anymore, except for I want to see the weather and stuff like that. But some of the weather apps I have on my phone are much better than the information I'm getting. But this concept that, hey, we're going to own the fact that we're the reason everybody was out there because we wanted to protest what we felt to be unjust, and I tend to agree with them. We've been used was the statement that's what I heard. They said it a little bit differently, but we've been used, and this bad stuff happened to people who are generally innocent, right?
Right.
They were down there largely outside supporting us, right? And so we're going to go back into the community and we're going to do what we believe to be the right thing. And I can be behind that all day. I don't even have to agree with everything you say, but I love ownership, right? When something goes wrong, who's going to own it?
So do you think Macy's continues their storefront in New York City?
I think there's a lot of businesses that between COVID and something like this have been waiting for a way to go out of business and maybe make a pop in insurance money or whatever you think on however you feel about that on the way out the door. You're going to see, like the grazing restaurants, as I call them, all the buffets.
Oh, they're done.
Well, they've been done for a while because the way people's eating habits have changed. And I'm not saying in large measure that everybody's getting healthier, but people are eating differently. A lot of it is because they're on the move, right? So people drive through and they're grabbing, how we talk about food on the move. But for all the big grazing, one of the big, I think it might even be a private equity firm, but it's certainly one of the big holding companies that owns all these brands of grazing. They're called FAT. It's FAT brands, right? I like Truth in Advertising, right? But they're largely been Golden Corral and all those. They've largely been people are walking away from them. I think now when you talk COVID, you're talking food safety issues and having, I don't care if you get the splatter shields in there or whatever. Everybody's grabbing the same spoon and all the other things, and so people are thinking about that differently. They're going to make a pop on the way out the door. Do you think Olive Garden's going to survive? Right, Darden brands, and what's the big hit that they're going to take? Even in Virginia Beach was a lot of, we have a lot of mom and pop, but there's still the chains there. McCormick and Schmick's has already said they're not coming back. All right, they're closing that restaurant down. They're closing that location for good. I tend to think it's a good thing because I think you get better food when you start getting the local, those local people. And
right. The chains are going to be hurt the most, I think, because they can afford to shut certain ones down that aren't as profitable, but the locals, they have no other choice, right? That's their only source of income. They're going to have to figure it out, and they will. Right. But your chains are the ones that are. They're like Starbucks is already what they say they close in like 300.
400 stores.
Yeah. Well, see, part of the problem too with those chains is especially if you talk about like animal products like meat, has huge commodity-based price fluctuations.
Right.
And so not only you getting hurt because people aren't coming, but when the people do come, what you have to serve them cost you way more, which the margins, at least in fast food, that's my expertise, are super razor thin, man. Super razor thin. Until you get into like soda, because typically like Coke and Pepsi will pay a brand to have their content there because then the other guy doesn't get there. But for like, dude, even down to like the salt and pepper packets, that shit has to be accounted for and it's expensive. Straws are expensive.
They make their money like Walmart does. It's in turnover.
Right.
Inventory turnover.
Think about this. So in the US, we give away ketchup and sauces, right? In England, you pay for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're and largely in Europe, but having lived in England, it was, the first time it's like, and I'll have 2 ketchups and they're like, well, that's 10p.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, all right. Well, that's why for that razor thin margin.
And that's why in some chains, like the main ones that I worked for, they're very careful on how much they give you. Whereas in other ones that maybe aren't as, let's say, high end, if you want to think about it that way, they'll just let you take handfuls whenever you want. Well, but fundamentally, in restaurants, the only way you have to control cost is through labor.
Right.
That's it. I mean, your inventory is your inventory.
But I think that's where Chick-fil-A nails it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They get people in there and have bought into that culture of my pleasure, right? To help you. And if you ask for 3 Chick-fil-A sauces, they're not going to say no.
Nope. Right? They're happy to give it to you.
But if you look now, like through COVID, it was so easy to tell who was doing well and who wasn't. All you had to do is drive by the store at dinner time and see how many people were in line through the drive-through.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think the most well-run, efficient like mechanism to move people on earth is a Chick-fil-A drive-through.
They're pretty clean.
They have it nailed down. All right. And
Their goal is less than 2 minutes from the time you order to having food in your car, in your vehicle. That's their goal. Is 2 minutes.
Well, and they like in the West they had In-N-Out.
Yeah.
And that it's amazing to watch the machinery of the industrialization of it work, because it's almost all cook on demand, as opposed to McDonald's where they're making X based on a certain time of day, based on a prediction, and they'll let it sit like in a hot bin.
Right.
It's a completely different thing. Man, sometime I'll have a show and I'll tell you guys all the ways store managers come up with to cheat those drive-through timers, because that's tied directly to their bonus.
Well, which is true, because one of my first jobs was a manager at a Wendy's.
Nice.
You fucked with that drive-through timer, didn't you?
Nice.
I can neither confirm or deny on this particular episode, but tune in when we got to talk about it, and I'll tell you some of the other things. You want to know how Wendy's chili is made?
No, I don't. I'm not into any of that.
Oh man!
And I might be not off on the number of stores, but like McDonald's right now is number one in the market.
Yeah.
I think they have like 40,000 stores. I could be, like I said, it's a ballpark. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
It's the Walmart of fast food.
And Chick-fil-A is number 2 now. They leaped over, and COVID's really helped them, because people are like, well, I can go sit in line and,
They surpassed Taco Bell?
Yeah, they're number 2 now. But their store count is under 10,000. Well under 10,000.
Oh, so it's in terms of revenue.
Right. And that model is like, look, they're providing a service that people want. And you can't tell them no. I mean, you look at all the advertisements now for for Burger King, they're all geared around it's almost a gimmick, like with the Impossible Burger. Right?
No.
Right.
Have you tried one of those?
I've tried. I'm not a big Impossible guy, I think, because there's a lot of soy, and I don't really do that. Whereas like Beyond Meat is not a lot of soy. One of these times, if we want, we'll talk about health food products and in air quotes.
Hey, did you check out that link that I sent you?
I did. That's awesome. But it's funny. Yeah. We'll have a bigger discussion about supplements. And
so I found this company that will basically white label supplements for you.
There's a lot of those companies out there.
Yeah, but I was just casually looking around after you and I talked on the lair. Yeah. I was like, and they'll do a custom blend. So for me, I'm really thinking about, once I get my results back from 23andMe and I send it up to Dr. Rhonda Patrick's site to kind of see what I should have, I might go there and just, so that way I have, I don't want to take 100 different things at one time. I want one thing, preferably in a powder form, that I can throw it in that bottle of water, even if I have to do it twice a day.
That's much more optimal, let alone efficient.
Yeah, and so I found. I was just looking at it because of our conversation, but I'm like, wow, this could be. Now I need to look a little bit more in terms of like, what's the actual ingredients? Is it animal? All the kind of stuff that I would get with some of the other ones. Like I really like. Oh shoot! Well, I can't think of any of the brands of the ones that I'm using right now. It'll come to me. But
when you look at the packaging label, like the nutrition, the facts label on the back, you have 3 labels. But there are 2 headings, but there's 3 specific labels. There's nutrition facts, and then you'll see supplement facts. It's not and the supplement facts are broken into 2 separate panels, right? The nutrition facts, when you see nutrition facts, it means that company went through the arduous process to be approved as a food source by the FDA. Right. So they can make health claims, right? Largely, that's why people want to do that. So they can make health claims. Supplements can't make health claims. They can infer outcome, right? Now, there's 2 types of supplement labels. You'll see that I want the ones that tell me what, in the case of, let's say, amino acids, I want it specifically broken down, which amino acids are in here, and more importantly, how much of each one is in there, right?
That's right.
A lot of companies will do, they'll put down the basics, and then at the bottom, they'll put down X amount of milligrams. It'll be a proprietary blend, and that's their thing. Well, that's just, so how much of each thing in your proprietary blend is in there? I don't know. And then there's NSF, there's testing criteria. Is it safe for Olympic athletes? Is it going to make you grow a dorsal fin or a tail, right? Those types of things. And so getting the public conscious about that, and even like to go buy a protein powder, right? How many ingredients are in it, right? That's the thing, like with Beyond Burger. I like the taste of Beyond Burger. But when you look at it, it's still a manufactured process. And if you say you're going to move towards like plant-based eating and things like that, you're saying, I want to eat, even if you're not, like if you're on a Mediterranean thing or keto or whatever, how much whole food can I eat? Right? Well, if you're going to say, I want to get big, I want to bodybuild, right? I want to lift and I want to get strong. So I want to bulk up, but I want to maintain being lean. I have to be having a lot more protein, right? For those folks out in TV land, protein is for recovery, carbohydrates is for energy. And so what type of carbs I have and everything, and how I'm manifesting, how my body type is. And Dan, I think, when you start saying, hey, I'm going to start using my genetics, right, to try to be a guidepost for me to help out. GenoPalette they're coming along, right? And if you have 23andMe data for a small fee, you can give that to GenoPalette, and they'll start to try to say, you may have food sensitivity to this. This will be better for you.
Yeah, and some of what Rhonda Patrick does too.
Right.
Yeah.
And but I think that and detailed labs. I'm a big, I don't get paid by me. I'm a big Cleveland Clinic guy. Mm-hmm. Right? When you go to your GP and you get labs, you get the basic stuff just to make sure you're not going to fall off the face of the earth in a hurry. And it's done statistically, right? There's a norm of highs and lows, and as long as you fit in the middle, we don't have to be too interventionist in what you do. I want to know specifically what I'm deficient in. I want to know, is my body inflamed internally? Right? Because those things drive a lot of other things. And so I always say you guys know, it's kind of like my hobby is like how to make yourself bigger, better, faster, more efficient, stay young as you get older, right? Because I think that's possible. You just have to be a proactive.
Clearly.
You just have to be proactive in your existence, right? When I went to the last time I got a physical a couple months ago, I went to my GP and we started talking about, what are you eating? And, your kind of my general health and some of the supplements. And I'm not taking anything wild. I mean, I'm taking vitamins and some amino acids, basically. And, some things like tart cherry and some other things that are, known to have a positive effect or linked strongly, right? And just talking about the way I eat, and I eat very clean. And he's like, oh, I'm not sure of that and everything else. And so my statement was, hey, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here because I've got to do this, right? I probably am a bigger participant in my own health than most folks because I've chosen to be. Mm-hmm. And so my question to him, and it's because we were talking about nutrition, right? And I said, so from the day you walked into your undergrad till the day you were licensed and allowed to touch humans without assistance, how long was that? It was like 10 years. I said, so in that 10 years, how many hours professionally have you spent learning about nutrition, right? And the answer was 0. And in fact, the AMA just put up a big stink when they were going to try to introduce 8 hours of continuing education units on nutrition, right? Because that's largely the problem. When you start talking about nutrition, more than when you start talking about what drugs, you start to invite legal action. Because if you tell somebody, don't eat this, or do eat this, and they do, now the hospital groups and things, and it becomes an insurance issue. I'm not a big believer that taking every supplement and doing it is right. I'm a big believer that finding out what works for you and eating whole foods is much better than eating processed foods, right? I'm not telling you to do it 100% of the time, but, eat a fucking carrot every now and again, right? And don't get up and move. Right. I mean, when 78% of Americans are overweight, I'm not talking about more obese or more obese, but technically overweight, you have it within your power, but there's no easy button. Right. And again, you go back to politics, you go back to anything, right? With 350 million people over 6 time zones, there's no easy answer. Right. No. And so everybody wants I got to have it now. I'm impatient. I want what I want when I want it and get out of my way. Right? Or I'm unwilling to make change. And that can be socially, politically, personally. right? And whether it's I got to make a change because I'm unhappy with how I am physically, you're probably not unhappy with how you are physically. You're unhappy with a lot of other things internally, and you got to work through those to allow you to get to the point where I can concentrate and be disciplined to achieve a different outcome with anything in your life.
That's right. Well said.
All true.
Agreed.
Look at this.
I concur. Dr. Pittman, I concur.
We kept the wheels on the cart.
Hey, listen, check this out. So, this is a good way to end this, maybe. Not too long ago, I was trying to get us on dedicated segments so I could cut it up. That doesn't work too well, as you notice, for various reasons. Dan,
I cannot understand why.
So now what I'm trying to do is take notes a little bit so that at least I can put stuff in the SEO when I go back to YouTube. So we covered 4 broad categories today: Twitter requiring reading before posting, Confederate statues, voting in elections, and then we just finished with health optimization and genetics. Dude, this is a variety show on steroids.
Yeah. No, on only approved supplements by USADA.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't get into steroids on this show.
Hey, I don't even know how to spell it. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm willing to get into TRT. Right? I'm under the heading of, I joke around. It's like I want to live to be 150. I just don't want to do it in a wheelchair holding a trophy. I want to be,
You mean you want to live another 150?
Yes.
Yeah. Too easy.
It's just, you want to be sliding at home plate going, look at this. Did you see that? Not rolled across being pushed in a wheelchair just because you're on the Today Show with Al Roker because you're a gazillion years old and just couldn't quit.
That's right.
Well, we'll have to talk about it on another show, but there's some interesting things that I've been reading, why some medical professionals aren't willing to put people on TRT because it's still the long-term effects still are not known.
Yeah. And you've got, like I said, I think it's anything in life, you've got to say it's a risk reward thing, right? I mean, life's about risk mitigation. But as we move deeper into the 21st century, more and more is known. And I'm going to say that whether it's any kind of hormone replacement therapy, it is going to become hugely popular in the next 10, 20 years. You know why? Boomers are getting older and they don't want to be older. Right?
Right.
And they have the largest amount of disposable income. They want to stay young. They spend more money on cosmetic procedures. They want to go hiking, climbing, sailing, doing whatever. And whatever they can do to stem that tide of being old, because they don't want to end up like their parents.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to end up sitting around the pool in Florida and largely being immobile because they've been immobile.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
awesome.
Then, you guys have a good weekend and a good week.
You as well,
my
sir.
friends. You all take care.
You.
Be safe out there, man.
You should worry about the others.
Oh.
It's just bookends, Jason. We start we end this way. It would be rude not to just accept the vibe and roll with the energy.
Yeah, we wouldn't be providing the required entertainment to our 2 viewers if we didn't do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. See ya.
Bye.